Hello, my name is Rudy Blair. I'm the host of CMW Virtual Voices, presented by RBC Emerging Artists Project. We're so glad for you to be here. In this first portion of today, we are going to be talking to Ole Obermann, Artist Discovery Keynote. Now, Ole Obermann is the global head of Music TikTok. And just throwing out there too, this section is also sponsored by TikTok. He will discuss TikTok's influential role in global artist discovery and the valuable promotions and various tools available to help break artists around the world. This is going to be a great conversation. Josh Rabinowitz, thank you. He's the founder, music consultant of Brooklyn Music Experience. Ladies and gentlemen, give Josh a big round of applause, and thank you so much.
Well, welcome to this exciting talk. We're speaking with one of the most important people in the music business. It's irrefutable. When they talk about the music industry these days, they say the impact of TikTok is undeniable. It's a platform for music like no other. If you want success in the music business, you have to understand TikTok. And Ole is someone who has digital music in his DNA. He will speak about his career journey, his path. I think he's going to be able to share with you some amazing tools that TikTok offers for artist discovery. As we all know, there's so many successes that have broke through TikTok, from Lil Nas X on to today. 13 out of the 14 Billboard Hot 100 songs in 2022 were driven by significant viral trends on TikTok. So again, it's undeniable, it's irrefutable that TikTok is super important, and we all need to know as much as we can, no matter if you're an artist or a manager, publisher, label, third-party sync agent, etc. For me as a music consultant, TikTok is part of my conversation every day. Every day there's a conversation. Every day I write the book. Every day there's a conversation about TikTok as a music consultant, whether it's an AI company that's looking to access the power of TikTok for their potential users and their communities. As a music supervisor, people are always saying to me, we want to create a trend on TikTok. We want to create a TikTok moment. How can we do it? As a music professor, all my students are a bullseye in terms of the age group. The discussion gets really passionate when we talk about music and media, and specifically TikTok. So I'd like to introduce Ole. I don't know exactly where he is. I think he's in Singapore. Ole, are you there?
Yes. Hello. Can you see? Can you hear me?
Can definitely hear you. How are you?
I'm doing really well. I'm sorry I'm not there in person. I'd love to be there in person. It's you look like you could use a companion up on the stage. But yeah, we had to be in Singapore. I'm based in London, but we had to be in Singapore this week. We had a big music team global meeting there. So I just got back to Europe yesterday, and there was just no way I could make it to Canada by this morning. So I'm sorry we have to do this virtually, but hopefully we can still make it fun and educational.
No, I definitely think we do. Is there a smoke situation in Singapore like there is over here in North America?
No. I'll clear air. Very nice. Singapore is an amazing city. I don't know if you've ever been. I've been there a bunch of times and I love it. Really, really nice city. Really very warm, friendly, great people.
I went there once for Music Matters. It was spectacular. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're really, really excited to have you, and I don't want to talk too much. I'm just going to ask you a bunch of questions, and please school people as much as possible. Let's start with, can you describe your role at TikTok, and can you speak about your team and the people that work for you and the endeavors that you are pursuing?
Sure. Yeah. So I maybe we'll get to this as well, but I worked in record labels for many years, 20 plus years. And I came over to TikTok and ByteDance a little less than 4 years ago. We've got a team of almost 800 people at this point within the company working on music. Many are technologists, people who are building the actual sort of product that makes music work on TikTok and in ByteDance, because we've got some other products in ByteDance that are pretty music heavy as well. But my role within that bigger team is really the kind of label and industry and artist and manager relations. I'm doing a lot of the licensing and the deals, the negotiations with all the various rights holder parties in the music industry. But I'm also, kind of like you were saying, I'm talking to AI companies, I'm talking to artist managers, we're talking to ticketing partners, live partners, merch companies, and we're just trying to figure out how do we build a bigger, better ecosystem for artists, like that's that. If I think about like what is the first thing on my mind every day, it's how do we do more for artists and with artists on TikTok, and how do we evolve TikTok so that it's better for the artists and the way that they connect with their fans.
Yeah, that's great. You mentioned some partnerships and you're dealing with AI companies, et cetera. Is there like a recent partnership that really speaks to what TikTok is trying to do in terms of artists and fans and the engagement?
You know which one I really like. We did something. This goes back a little less than a year now, but it was kind of a fun one. So Simon Cowell came and pitched us with this idea well over a year ago. But his idea was, how do we take the format of talent discovery in music and make that work in TikTok? And we definitely, we all agreed right out of the gate. We were like, that's an amazing idea. Let's figure out what we can do. But we also agreed you can't just take what works on television and try to translate that directly. It just wouldn't fly. So what we ended up doing, we came up with a program called STEM Drop. We actually got Universal Music on board as the label partner, and we got Samsung on board as the brand partner. And the concept works like this. We had a big songwriter, in this case it was Max Martin. He wrote a song, and then we broke that into a handful of stems. So different kind of instruments and harmonies and melodies and so forth in stems. We built a stem drop player, we called it, in TikTok, and we dropped the stems in, and then we just said to the TikTok community of creators, just go for it, and what can you come up with on the back of this song? And it was pretty incredible. Literally hundreds of thousands of submissions, and everything from like many goth versions, country music versions, banjo versions, EDM versions, pop versions, rock versions. I mean, everything, Latin versions, like everything you could imagine. And the reason I mentioned that one is I think that is the beauty and the magic of TikTok is you just let a community of, well over 1 billion people around the world kind of go for it and be as creative as you want to be, as you can be, just show us what you got. And then the algorithm, the For You feed, ends up doing a really good job of pairing those creations with the right audience, because there are signals in terms of, what does that audience like? And so I think when you have that many creative people around the world contributing amazing stuff, and then you can do a really good job of getting in front of the right people, some pretty fun and interesting and magical things can happen. So I think that was a fun one.
Yeah, that sounds like a great one. I would love to have the ability to use some of the stems from my favorite songs. Anytime there's a great stem out there online, I pull it in. My ringtones are stems, It's an awesome thing. From a career perspective, as I mentioned, you seem to have a very digital music DNA. Your experiences have been mostly digital at a time when people didn't really maybe understand the digital space, and now you've kind of come over to TikTok and you're using your expertise to help leverage amazing things. Can you briefly talk about your trajectory and the experiences that led up to the role, and they're probably how useful they've been?
Yeah. I hope there's some young future stars in the music industry sitting in the audience there today. So I think it's actually, I remember when I was starting out, I loved going to these kinds of things because you wanted to understand the different kind of paths of travel that people who ended up in the industry for a long time or in some of the more senior leadership positions, how did they get there? So hopefully we have some young stars sitting in the audience. I started out back when there were five majors. I started out at BMG as a product manager. We were still selling CDs. I actually worked in jazz and classical for BMG Classics and Jazz for a few years. And then, digital was kind of a twinkle in everyone's eye. And I ran a company called Liquid Audio for a few years. That was like a really early days, Silicon Valley, DSP. We powered some of the first downloads for Amazon and for Walmart and some of the big sort of traditional retailers. And then I came back to the label side and I worked about 15 years at Sony and Warner, ultimately as chief digital officer at Warner Music, doing all the deals. Like I did the first Spotify deal, the first YouTube deal, the first Apple Music deal when they launched their streaming service, and then the Musical.ly deal. And Musical.ly ended up getting acquired by ByteDance and then became the platform which TikTok was launched on, a handful of years ago. So I actually really got to know the ByteDance team pretty well through initially the Musical.ly deal that we did. And then when ByteDance acquired Musical.ly, we had some other dealings. We had to kind of figure out how we would transfer over the rights and the licenses and so forth. So I got to go see them in China a few times, and they came and saw us in New York a bunch of times. So built a relationship with them, and I think this is worth just spending a minute on. Like I remember so vividly, right as we were doing the deal with ByteDance to move Musical.ly licenses over, I started using TikTok, or what was really Douyin at that point, which is the Chinese version of TikTok. And I kept getting these songs. These were songs in many cases in various Asian languages. So I couldn't even understand the lyrics. But some of the melodies were amazing. Some of the videos were amazing. And I was just sitting there thinking, I'd been doing this for a long time. I'd seen literally hundreds and hundreds of digital music companies and startups and ideas and concepts. And I was just sitting there thinking, I've never experienced a music marketing kind of tool like this, because the feed was awesome. I kept getting, kind of cooler and cooler stuff as I got to know what I liked more and more. And it was music that I never would have stumbled across on my own, because much of it was like, it was like Vietnamese and Japanese and Chinese and all these languages that I don't speak. But I was just finding song after song that I was getting really excited about. And so it was definitely kind of a light bulb moment of like, there's something really special here. And then, started talking to the ByteDance team about maybe going over to the other side. They were really excited about that, because they were like, we don't understand kind of the global music business the way that we need to. And you do, and you've done that for many years. So, we'd love to have you come over. And the rest is history. That was about 4 years ago.
It's really interesting and really rewarding information to hear about. Here's a question that's really interesting to me. Why does music work so damn well on TikTok?
Yeah. So I just alluded to it a little bit, right? In when I was telling you kind of that light bulb moment, but just take a step back. So the motto, or sort of the mantra for TikTok, it's a two-sided thing. It is inspire creativity. So how do we lower the barriers for people to be creative? And that can mean making amazing 30-second videos. It can mean, making a video of yourself acting, talking, educating, whatever it is, but sort of be creative and be entertaining while you do that, because that's what's ultimately going to get you seen and heard. Or obviously it can be music. It can be, unsigned, unknown artists who are uploading amazing songs that might become future hits. It can be people being very creative with remixing or just reimagining existing songs, kind of back to the stem drop thing we talked about. So that's the inspire creativity side of it. And then the kind of demand side is bring joy. So There was actually a great quote about TikTok. This goes back probably 2.5, 3 years, but the New York Times at one point said, TikTok is the last sunny corner on the internet because I think, and this was sort of during the COVID time when TikTok really grew, because people were stuck at home, they had a lot of time. All of a sudden, you saw, lots of families making TikTok videos together because they were just like, hey, let's go do something fun and kill some time. So there really was like this kind of feeling of joy that was coming across. Like people were uploading fun, entertaining, joyous videos onto TikTok. It's a very simple formula, but if you can get people to be uninhibited in expressing themselves creatively, and then if you can do an amazing job of matching the right video to the right audience and bringing the joy to that audience because you understand the type of music or content that they're going to be most interested in, I think that formula works really well. Maybe everyone knows this or understands this, but no two TikTok feeds are the same, right? Like well over 1 billion people using TikTok. Everybody is getting a different feed, because the For You feed is very sensitive and kind of understands the signals and, decides what to serve you up, and you skip things, you like things, you share things, you watch them again, and then it adjusts all the time on the fly. And I think that's what makes it work so well. If you kind of peel it back a little bit more, I do think that TikTok, some people have said it's like radio, some people have said it's like MTV. It's kind of like all those things wrapped up into one and then on steroids because of how big and global and kind of always adjusting it is. So it's really basic marketing, right? How do you put the right music in front of the right fan to help them discover the music that they're hopefully going to end up falling in love with? And I think TikTok just does that better than anything else we've ever seen.
Yeah, for sure. It's just unbelievable how important it's become. And let's speak to the evolution a little bit of TikTok within the music industry and how it's resonated with the music industry. Initially, people in the music industry, traditional people from the business that you came from, didn't accept it with open arms. There was a lot of hesitation, just like with streaming, right? Just like with every other kind of development, people hold on to what they know. It's the old school, and you start to get frustrated as a younger person. You're like, come on, just get with it. You guys are ridiculous. But can we speak to that evolution and kind of how it started with music and how it's really coming to its own now and there's an embracing?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think you can almost think in chapters a little bit, right? Like the first chapter was, you're right, there was a resistance, this is almost like maybe a little gimmicky because it was just clips, right? It wasn't full-length songs. But I think the A&R people actually caught on the quickest. And you mentioned Lil Nas X earlier, I think. That was like the first really big signing that happened off of TikTok because his song went absolutely nuts. And, it was the top song on radio when radio was the biggest marketing and promotional tool for music. So everybody had heard this song, you had the hook in your ear, and obviously Columbia Records came along and signed him and had, big commercial success with that song. So I think that was the A&R phase. And then once that happened and matured a bit, the marketing and promotion teams started figuring out, like, wow, this is a place with a big audience and a rapidly growing audience. And we need to figure out how we get, whether it's new releases from superstar artists, but we want to get the word out there that, Dua Lipa's got a big new song out. Let's make sure that's all over TikTok. Or emerging artists like Olivia Rodriguez, she's obviously a superstar now, but that song really blew up on TikTok and was a big part of how she became this, household name around the world. And Driver's License became, one of the biggest songs of the year and was on the Billboard charts for, I can't remember, 25 weeks or whatever it was, just a long, long time. So, and then, the third category is the unsigned, undiscovered artist who is also having that moment, and that's more on the A&R and the marketing promotion side. So all three of those, I think became a big part of why the record labels were so focused on doing marketing and promotion. And I'd say we're just at the onset of, the next chapter, which is we're building much more product or many more tools that will help the record industry promote and market, and do what they want to do, to kind of further their jobs and their ability to break artists or break songs. So we're much more leaned in now, and we're talking to them much more regularly about what would actually help you as a record label marketing person, work more closely with TikTok. And we can, I can talk a little bit about some of those things we're working on. But I think we're now in that chapter where it's much more of a dialogue of like, right, how do we build things that help the industry?
And does the industry come to you? I would think they're like banging at your door asking you for advice. You mentioned A&R. I think the way people do A&R has completely changed because of TikTok and social media. Obviously, data and analytics. It's not artist development as much as seeing how many impressions or views or hits somebody has. Same with marketing, same with music licensing. I mean, I'm a music licensing person as part of my consultancy, and people are always sending me, this is what's trending on TikTok, BMG, Warner, etc. What are those collaborations and interactions like with the music industry, the present music industry?
Yeah. I think it's overall, there's a very positive and excited collaboration, right? Like, and certainly at the kind of individual product manager level, they're really fun conversations because they come to us and they're like, we've got a song that we think is amazing, artist we think is amazing. Let's get creative and figure out what we can do together on TikTok to get this artist or this song out there. And I think many of us who work in the music business, that's why we do it, right? Because we love discovering that amazing new song and then maybe being a part of the team or the initiative that gets that song to become really big and popular and gets it heard by, hundreds of millions of people potentially. So those are the conversations that are happening, every day all around the world on that level. Then we've got the conversations at the kind of corporate level where we're talking about, the bigger initiatives, the longer term initiatives that we can build out together. And the licenses, the renewals, the negotiations. There's going to be tension in the system sometimes with those conversations because it's very symbiotic. We really need one another, but it's also, we've just started kind of dating and we're still figuring out one another. It's only been a few years. So both sides are kind of like, how do I really make it clear what's most important to me? And how do we kind of draw the right lines in terms of how this works? And I think that's the phase we're in with, kind of the higher level discussions that we're having with the music industry overall.
Yeah, it was definitely that way with branding, music and branding, embracing branding. People were like, I don't want to sell out, and then they had to sell in. Same with streaming, right? People did not embrace streaming, the old school, as I alluded to before. And certainly with TikTok, it seems like there were some bumps, but it just seems now like it's completely shifted. Do you feel like you have a great direct conduit to record labels and publishers that you didn't have maybe 4 years ago when you joined? Is that like a meaningful kind of interaction and kind of engagement?
Yeah, no, it is. I think 4 years ago when I joined, there just was a lack of understanding, and like I said, there was some A&R people who were leaning in already, and Lil Nas X was just happening around that time, and a few others off the back of that. but it was just still, it was relatively niche. We were also much, much smaller back then. I can't remember the number, but I'm going to say maybe we were 200 million users, and now we're well over a billion users. We haven't disclosed a public number on that in a while, but we're well over a billion. So you just think about the size of the audience that we're addressing. And so obviously, the industry is going to kind of follow that and say, all right, we need to get our heads around this. There are still a lot of conversations where we have to explain, how does it really work? And it's so different from what the industry has been used to, because you have to maintain a balance between, we're building these tools, we're enabling the labels and even the publishers to market their artists, their songs, their songwriters in a way that works for them, but we cannot kind of manipulate the For You feed, because it has to be organic. It has to work off of the signals that it gets around what's the TikTok community excited about, right? So I view it as, we give the tools to the label or the publisher, the artist themselves, the manager, and we say, here's the toolkit that you can use to create the best kind of version of yourself as an artist and your song on TikTok. But once you release it into this sort of ecosystem of TikTok, it's out of all of our control. And hopefully, the right creator or the right community is going to hear this, love it, start doing amazing things with it, and then it's going to blow up and you're going to become, a big star. The song's going to be really, really successful. But that's a little different than it has worked traditionally, because I think it was a more predictable and maybe even somewhat controlled system in the past, and that has gone away. And that's what makes TikTok so magical. And so we're not going to change that, and we have to kind of work within that paradigm.
Yeah, there's a beauty in that unpredictability. Certainly, to make a hit record, there was some control that you could have, and very limited distribution and resources and stakeholders, and et cetera, gatekeepers, tastemakers. It seems like now the gatekeepers, the tastemakers, the stakeholders, it's just the creative community out there. I think that's a really special thing. Why don't we talk about some of these touch points for artists that TikTok have? I think it's really important for people to know about them. They probably know about some, but not everything that's going on.
Sure. Yeah. So, I'll break it into a couple different sort of chapters again. There are two ways that we work with artists on TikTok. One is, and this is the bigger group, these are record label signed artists, and so, or publishing signed songwriters. And I emphasize that because we are seeing the publishers, they're almost starting to behave a little more as marketeers than they have in the past. I think publishing, for those of you who know the publishing business well, it's about finding a great song, and then the marketing almost happens behind the scenes, because you try to pair that great song up with the right performing artist, and then the consumer marketing ends up happening for the recorded music version of the song. But what we're seeing the publishers do in some cases is they'll have, the songwriter performing the song themselves in order to just kind of get a buzz about the song, maybe even before it ends up getting released commercially by a record label, or in the process leading up to that. And we're really excited about that, because we think, the publishing and sort of the copyright part of the music industry, there's like massive potential for UGC and, different derivative versions of the song, kind of going back to the stem drop thing again as well. So that's becoming more and more important to us. But anyway, so we have hundreds of people around the world who work on what we call our artist services team, and they're account managing these record label or publisher partners. They're hearing the new music. We program it into our editorial. We might be able to do even more than that, in that we can like really feature one of the songs because it fits in with some of the bigger programming initiatives that we have on TikTok, Black History Month or Pride or whatever sort of a big theme is that TikTok is going to reflect, because it's a moment in what's happening in culture and around the world. We're always going to try to find the right music to put into that. And obviously, if you get featured there, you're probably going to get much more visibility, hopefully tons of creations on the back of that. And that can lead to, ideally billions and billions of views of videos that include the song. We also will pair up the right, what we hope is the right song or artist with the creator network that we have. So we obviously have some very prolific creators who are really, musically obsessed. And they might be talking about, their 10 picks for the most exciting new artists for that month or something like that. And so these are, kind of the tastemakers, like the journalist that was writing the Billboard or the Rolling Stone article saying, here are 10 artists to keep your eyes on. Now that could be a creator on TikTok. And so if you end up breaking into that list, that's really impactful, because that, that kind of editor or creator might have 1 million followers on TikTok or hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok. So all of these kind of avenues are the ones that we will work with the label and publisher partners on to get their music, in front of as many eyes and ears as possible. And just like in terms of some of the product features that we're working on that I mentioned earlier, one of the things that we have just soft launched, so we're kind of still testing it, but it's out there now. We were getting lots of feedback from the industry that there was incredible discovery of music happening on TikTok, but how do we then kind of enable the full length listening in the most frictionless way? Because when we did research, what we found is people will find the song through the video, through the clip, and then they'll either look at the metadata, go search for the metadata and go to Spotify, Apple, Amazon, etc., and search for the song, or they'll even Shazam with a different device the song and then go into Apple or wherever they go into to listen full length. So we just launched the first integration of our what we call TikTok to DSP or to streaming service functionality. And so now there's for some users, because we're still testing it, there's a pretty prominent display that comes up that allows you to save the song that you're listening to in TikTok into a playlist. And right now it's just Apple Music we're working with, but we're hoping to expand that to other services as well. So it ends up becoming kind of a one-click, almost like Shazam, where you love the song, you're like, what is this? And you just hit a button and it goes right into a playlist on Apple Music for you. So, those are the kinds of things that we're building out, because we want to build a better experience for the artist and for the industry, and also for the user in terms of like full scope of music, listening, monetization, discovery, all those things that are important to the music industry.
How do you engage with these curators, these tastemakers that you're speaking of? Obviously, Spotify had playlisters, and for a moment, I saw in the Wall Street Journal, the most important people in the music industry are the playlisters at Spotify. And I was like, really? Okay. Yeah. Do you have like active engagement with some of these tastemakers, curators, gatekeepers?
Yeah. I mean, look, there's two ways you can do this. You could literally go onto TikTok, spend an hour, and you will quickly find a few of these, editorial creators who have really big followings and just do a really great job of making kind of entertaining content about which music they love. And then you message them directly and say, here's my song. I mean, that happens and it works. There is also almost like a little cottage industry that has popped up around this. So there are creative agencies out there who work directly, have relationships with these creators, and a label, a manager, an artist could go to them and say, I want to kind of pitch you on a song or an artist, who we think is amazing and has tons of potential, and you should know them. And that could lead to inclusion. So, not unlike it has worked in the past, but I kind of love the path of it happens in TikTok where, some unknown artist just DMs one of these creators and says, check out my song. And they're like, holy shit, this is an amazing song. I'm gonna talk about this song. And that does happen. This is going slightly different direction, but I know that sync and commercial music is dear to your heart. So this is something I wanted to touch on today. We are seeing some really great examples of songs that we feature in what we call our commercial music library. So we have a library that is pre-cleared for commercial use, and then we have our total premium music library, which is really all the world's music, and that's licensed for use for individual use, personal use on TikTok. You need a separate license to be able to enable a brand to use a song when they make a TikTok, which is their advertisement on TikTok, right? That's a kind of a commercial sync license. But some music we have pre-cleared for that. And through a program that we call Sound On, which is for unsigned artists who are uploading their music into TikTok in the hopes of getting discovered by, maybe a record label or a publisher. We talk to those artists because they own the rights, and we say, do you want us to feature in the commercial music library? So there have been some really interesting case studies where we end up featuring one of these songs in the commercial music library, and the marketing and the promotion and the traffic happens entirely on the brand side. So there's a song called Gaslight by an artist, Ingie. She's a young woman based in Philadelphia, and she just, she's got a few really catchy, great songs. And she came in through Sound On, the commercial music library. We featured this song. It had a little bit of a spark on Spotify, like there was kind of a viral thing going on there already. But we heard about it very early on. We featured it, and she ended up getting tens of billions of views on TikTok within a few months, off the back of not personal creators or even like influencers using the music, but what we call SMBs. So these are the small and medium-sized businesses. So like the taco truck, on the corner in Brooklyn, and they spend $500 to market themselves on TikTok, and they want to make kind of a fun, cool, catchy video, and they end up using Ingie Gaslight. She ended up making a few $100,000 off of a split that she gets from the use of the music in those, commercials. And the song has gone on to be, absolutely massive. It's kind of charting in all the indie playlists around I don't know about around the world yet, mostly in the kind of European and US market, but, really, really big presence for her and this song, and very much driven by commercial use. And we love that, because we're like, hey, if the brands want to use music and we can give them a really cool song, and then they actually end up becoming a part of breaking that song, they're super invested. They're really excited. They're like, oh, we had this, kind of touch point with a moment in culture on the back of an advertising campaign that we did. But the song ends up becoming huge, and, hopefully the artist gets a record label deal or goes on to do whatever he or she want to do to whatever success means for them in terms of being an artist. So we love that case study or sort of that way of breaking an artist, because going back to the thing you were asking about earlier, the record labels are always saying, and the publishers, how do we break more songs and more artists on TikTok? And one of the things we're saying is, get the music into the commercial music library, especially if it's an emerging artist and you want them to be discovered. And if this thing kind of catches fire and there's a little moment of magic with these SMBs, these little businesses, they'll all jump on board. It'll end up becoming a trending song, and it can just, hockey stick kind of immediately off the back of that. So that's kind of a cool case study.
Yeah, it's a wet dream for brands, I assure you. They are constantly asking me to make these magic moments happen. We only have a couple more minutes. What are some other like nuts and bolts things for artist discovery for emerging artists? There are some emerging artists here that you could suggest that are part of the platform.
Yeah. Do you know? All right, this is not an emerging art. Well, it is an emerging artist. It's another case study that I'll talk about, and I'll kind of explain why I think this is important. So this goes back to early 2021, but there was a young Scottish postman named Nathan Evans, and you know the one.
Yes.
Yeah. So this is the Wellerman, right? Like, so these are like these folk songs that sailors wrote and sang when they were out rowing the seas, hundreds and hundreds of years ago. But this young guy, Nathan Evans, he ends up doing this Wellerman video, and it absolutely goes nuts. And the point of connection here, we need a good Canadian artist story. So Nickelback ends up coming in with the Wellerman is going bonkers. Like, there's billions of views on Nathan Evans doing this, and everybody's getting really creative, and they're doing mashups of it. They're doing choral or orchestral versions of it. They're doing like split screen duets of it. All sorts of creative things happening, because the Wellerman is this very sort of harmonic song that you can do tons with. So Nickelback comes on, and they use the lyrics from Rockstar, which was a big song in 2006, but they set it to the harmony of Wellerman, and it ends up completely blowing up in 2021 and, becomes a big hit song again. And so the reason I mention that one is, for a young emerging artist, like, you have to spend time on TikTok. You have to really kind of engulf yourself in it and just start to figure out what the trends are, what the things are that are getting the community on TikTok excited, and then be creative and figure out how you plug yourself as an artist or your music into that. And that could be that you take a trend that's happening already, but you improvise and make your version of the song, which then introduces you as an artist and the way that you create or perform or kind of what you convey creatively to the community on TikTok. And again, like, those are the things that I just get so excited about, because it's just so kind of pure and organic. And really all that TikTok is doing at that point is it is connecting the right people, right? Like, the creative and the audience do the work, but TikTok, being this very large platform with a very large audience, enables that connection. And I think, like, that's TikTok at its purest form, enabling music promotion, marketing, creation, and hopefully success off the back of that. So I kind of love that case study.
Yeah, that's an excellent case study. And creativity is king, or creativity is queen, I think, is the lesson that we've learned here. Thanks so much for looping in here with us and sharing all your insight. And we're looking forward to the future at TikTok. It's going to be amazing, the things that are happening. I'm sure you are.
We are too. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Again, I wish I could be there in person, but really enjoyed the conversation. So great to see you.
Thanks, man. Thanks so much.
Take care. Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you again. One more time. Big round of applause, everybody. One more time.